15, 16 episodes of this show. I would love that. Hi, everybody. Ron Onesti from Rock and Roll Heaven. We are a bandleader located in St. Charles, Illinois, outside of Chicago. Hangin Bangin, with artists on lockdown, our regular show each week. We focus some of the greatest names, biggest icons, and legends in rock and roll in front of the mic, behind the mic, and tonight behind the drums. We've got with us a very, very special individual, and I'll tell you a little bit about him in a minute. But before we do that, got to bring on our co-host, my big brother. Talk about a drummer legend, rock and roll icon. This guy has been touched so many lives, professional and others. I mean, it's been an honor to work with him. Let's bring him to the camera. Carmine Appice from Vanilla Fudge, Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, and hundreds of other incarnations. What's up, Carm?
Hey, man, how you doing?
Good to see you. I love the purple. I love the purple there.
Yeah, look at that. Huh? I got all the purple in there, and I'm rocking again.
You look
I'm just
great.
I'm trying to find out if I can go in a pool with this stuff, or is it all going to come out?
That is going to be interesting. A little purple water, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
It's better than blue hairs, I guess, out in Florida where you're at.
Yeah, there's a lot of blue. Period.
Well,
But, our buddy we're going to bring on now is in Florida. He's right down the street, and we're going to actually get together physically.
All these people you've had on there, they're either one of two things: either from Brooklyn. He's from Jersey though, but they're either from Brooklyn or they're living in Florida. And that's going to be amazing. Once this thing is over, you've got to put together some major, party with all these celebrities down in Florida that you're with.
Good idea. Once we get the house done, we're going to have a welcome party.
Oh, hope I'm invited. I'll come from Chicago, bro.
You can come, no problem.
Well, speaking of bringing somebody on the camera, we'll wait for our little brother Vinny soon. Vinny soon, yes. But let's bring our this guy. You've been teasing me with this name for a while, Carm, and I am so excited because we've been trying to get him to the Arcada Theater for a while, and his schedule being with Springsteen and the E Street Band, being with, obviously you'll know him from Conan O'Brien, but so many other ways. He's got a band called Max Weinberg's Jukebox. Let's bring him on, the incredible, oh my goodness, Max Weinberg. How you doing, Max?
Hey, my fellas, good. Carmine, Ron, good to see you.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. It's good to be with you. And
yes,
I got excited. You played to keep me hanging on.
Right.
And, wow. What can I tell you about that? That was I remember the first time I heard that song. Carmine, of course, knows this, but the first time I heard that song, that completely changed my direction in drumming. Completely. Yeah. Nobody ever heard anything like that. And the beautiful thing is that Carmine has continued to reach that level on the drums ever since that thing first hit the airwaves. And I'm talking AM radio. AM radio. Yeah, I remember when FM radio was called underground radio. Remember that? It was underground radio.
Yeah, WOR FM in New York. I think it had Murray K and Scott Muni. And it was all underground, and they would play the whole record.
Oh, they did, absolutely. Yeah. The first time I heard it was on a transistor radio, which is, nobody even remembers what that is, but groundbreaking. So it's great to be with you guys. And as Carmine says, he's sort of my up-the-road neighbor, and now in Florida.
So what do you
you got to tell, hey, Ron, Max has to tell you about when he was a kid, when he hired Vanilla Fudge.
Yes.
He hired Vanilla Fudge.
I did, yeah. So I talked about
that's when I met him.
And what did you pay?
How I did that? Well, the Vanilla Fudge, again, you have to understand how impactful the Vanilla Fudge were. The only place you could really play, there were a couple of shows. There was Upbeat, I think from Detroit, maybe, I guess it was. But they played live on the Ed Sullivan Show. To get on the Ed Sullivan Show in the first place was a huge deal. So when I was a junior in high school, the school decided to form a concert committee to put on a concert And it took a year to get it together, but I got on the concert committee. Now, they were talking 1968. I got on the concert committee specifically to lobby my other committee members and go out into the town in New Jersey, raise the money specifically to book the Vanilla Fudge. and by the way, I would get my band to open to the Vanilla Fudge.
Right.
Essentially, they wanted to meet Carmine, right? It was impossible to meet somebody like Carmine Appice. But I figured, well, if I book them, or if I do something that leads to them being booked and put on a concert, it was my senior year, 1969. I think it was May. It's right at the end of the year. I got my high school band to open. If I remember correctly, I think we got $500, my band. And the ironic thing was the Fudge were coming from Long Island and got stuck in traffic. So we ended up playing about a 2-hour set. We broke. And then, of course, as soon as they got there, and Carmine looks essentially exactly the same as he did then, but I got to meet him, and they were dressed outlandishly. I had a friend of mine, a little subterfuge going on, surreptitiously go up into the rafters of the auditorium stage. There was a catwalk, and I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I said, I want you to tape this. And I had 2 microphones. So you made a bootleg. You have my band, and you have the Vanilla Fudge. And their first song was, I think the first song may have been Break's song, which was everybody. Oh, it may have been that or some.
No, maybe she's.
But I have
there.
the whole thing on maybe that. Yeah. But I taped it on little tape. I went down to Newark, New Jersey, and transferred it to what they used to call an acetate made out of black, which I still have, right? And so great memories. But I immediately had to have a Carmine Appice Ludwig drum set. So I sold my first set and got that drum set, which had 2 bass drums, because he had 2 bass drums.
Big bass.
Although I did, as Carmine knows, I saw the big bass drums. I got 24-inch bass drums. Didn't get the really big ones, but the first time I saw the Fudge was the summer of '68 up in the Catskill Mountains. And Carmine had his Red Sparkle Pearl single bass drum set. And the sound was just unbelievable. You can't believe the sound. It was incredibly tight, progressive. Whatever happened afterwards in terms of groups playing that way, in my view, and a lot of people's view who grew up in the 60s, who followed such things, Vanilla Fudge was the first. Before Zeppelin, before all the metal groups out of no one had ever sounded like that. And then to take a Supreme song and turn it on its head like that. But anyway, I got the drum set, and about 3 weeks later, one of the bass drums got stolen at a high school dance that I was playing at. Uh-huh. And I couldn't afford to get another bass drum. So I just learned how to try to do everything on one bass drum. I don't think it worked out that well, but I still have that set. I used that set on every record I made with Bruce and the E Street Band in the 70s, and then Born in the USA, I used that drum set.
Wow, Carmine, I didn't know that. No, that's great. I love that drum sound on that record, especially on that track.
Yeah, well, that was just the 2 Shure microphones literally up in the ceiling, and that drum set.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, so a lot of fond memories. Saw the band play at the Action House, but I saw Cactus. What's amazing is since I now have another opportunity to talk about my friend and hero, drum hero, Carmine Appice, was that he was able to continue that. That's one of the hardest. Bands were always breaking up, but he carved out a unique career in drumming, by writing the first rock drum book, by playing, by songwriting, singing drummer. People,
singing drummer. That was me.
Drummer. And he had that microphone.
Hey, hold on, Max. I'm not going to be able to walk out of this room here in a minute.
That's right.
I know more about Carmine than he knows about himself as a fan, as a 16-year-old.
He does.
But here we are all these years later.
Hey, he also sent me, Ron, he also sent me the actual poster for that gig in the mail, and I still have it. I have it here in my studio.
Awesome right there. I think what we should do is just make this the Ron and Max show and have Carmine as our guests.
Yeah.
I think that's what we should do.
I have fun with that, but
and that's what I was saying earlier, Max. I mean, I've been doing this with him 15, I don't know, was it 16, I think, Carm? 16 episodes?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And it's just incredible how many lives, professional and otherwise, he and his brother, Vinny, have touched. It just blows my mind. Everybody says some wonderful things about the Appice Appice combo there. And I'm excited to be a part of it. But anyway, enough about us. Let's talk about you.
Did you show him your T-shirt?
Yeah, he loved it.
The T-shirt. Yeah, the record I did when I was leading the band on the late night program.
Ah, there's Vinny.
I'm late.
You're late. Where are you?
I'm in Thousand Oaks. We're setting up for tomorrow. We're doing a big video. Hey, Max.
Say hi to Max, Vinny.
Hey, Vinny.
Yeah, how you doing, Max?
I'm doing great. Good to see you again.
You too. Yeah, I thought it's a fantasy camp one.
From one family, the Appice brothers. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I saw Vinny do a record. I think you did this record with Peter Gabriel. Did you do a record in the early 80s?
No.
Ever?
No.
You have what they call a doppelganger, a guy who looks exactly like you, who did your session. You should have done.
That's impossible because he looks like me. No.
Or maybe it was
Carmine.
Maybe it was me.
Yeah. Well, Vinny, we're talking about your brother and how, single-handedly, so you must have been 3 or 4 years old. He did change the course of rock drumming, which went from, the English invasion, as you guys know, of course, but some people listening and watching may not know. It was basically kind of what all the English drummers were doing. And then Carmine and Dino Danelli come out.
Yeah.
Dino's quite a different style.
Yeah.
Carmine comes out. The first time I ever heard somebody do triplets between the snare and the tom-toms. That stuff.
I showed him that when I was like 6. I was 6.
When he was 6, right?
You were a precocious young man.
I showed him that. Yeah. No, I know. He broke the frontier.
It's when you talk about influences, and doing research on you, I thought it was interesting. Obviously, Carmine being an influence, and we always many times, obviously, on this program, we've talked about Krupa, we've talked about Buddy Rich, of course, and I found it interesting that one of your influences, besides so many others, was Bernard Purdie, who's a very good friend of ours at the Arcada Theater as well. What made you go down his road as being one of the inspirations?
With Bernard, well, if you, I had the great fortune I was 19, so it must have been 1970. I had a friend in New York who was an attorney who was handling a singer who was a great Broadway star. Her name was Dolores Hall, and still is, I'm sure. I haven't seen her in a long time. Wonderful, unbelievable singer, soul singer. And
that's when they used to have Broadway.
When they used to have, yes. Well, they still do until recently, but
that's what I mean.
New York was just a unbelievable talent, and she did a record, and somehow somebody invited me to this session, and I knew who Bernard Purdie was, Pretty Purdie. I'd heard the stories, but he was the drummer on the session.
Yeah,
and I was 19, and so of course, I was looking for a way in, and I also wanted to see if he gave lessons, and he said, well, he did do lessons. So I arranged at the age of 19 until I was about 22 to take lessons. Lessons was an interesting tutelage, guys. His lessons basically consisted of picking up his dry cleaning, going grocery shopping,
Really?
When you did that,
God.
you did that long enough, then he would show you something on the actual drums, maybe picking them up and driving them around. And I didn't realize it. I said, when am I going to learn the funky stuff? Which we did get to eventually, but it was, his whole thing was to, particularly with guys my age who were just on the, we were trying to find ourselves. I remember he said to me, the first thing they all do is they talk about their girlfriend and what the problem is with the girlfriend. So we got past that, and he did show me about 6 weeks in, he showed me how to play the drum break in Rocksteady, which then, of course, I worked on forever. But I had some wonderful experiences with him going to sessions. It took me to several Aretha Franklin recording sessions. The sessions for Daydream. And then one time there was this phenomenal rehearsal show at the Apollo. And it was for the Aretha's Live at the Fillmore West. They did 2 shows to rehearse that weren't recorded or taped at the Apollo Theater before they went to the Fillmore West. Bernard was the drummer, Cornell Dupree on guitar, Chuck Rainey, I believe it was, Selden Powell, sax player, the guys who made all those records. And I got chosen to drive him up there and bring his drums and set up the drums. So I was his roadie. I was 20, and it was a thrill. It was an unbelievable thrill. You couldn't believe it. I mean, here I was, crouching behind him. And then, so on the Fillmore West, Ray Charles showed up. On this particular show, Ray Charles didn't show up, but King Curtis led the band. And I'm like surrounded by these monster musicians, just incredible musicians. And it was very exciting. And I really learned a lot. And I learned the way he taught the drums, Bernard Pretty Purdy, was he didn't show you licks. He didn't show you rudiments. He let you absorb. It let you into his world and absorb his vibe. And he was, as he still is, at the age of, I guess he's about 80, maybe a little older, an incredibly, I'm sure you'll agree, he's an incredibly commanding take charge drummer.
Great. Yeah. We used to do a thing at the NAMM show with calzone cases. And he'd have a little drum set at the booth. And it was me and Bernard. We've been friends for a long time. And he would just get on the drums and start doing that, what he calls the Purdy shuffle. Just
Purdy shuffle. Right.
And he'd just sit there and play it, get the groove going, and he'd talk over it. And he'd like shoot the shit over it while he's playing the groove. And it was so relaxed and so good. Now, I was introduced to him by my friend Dean Parachute. He had a hit record in the 60s. He used to play with my band. Somehow we got a record that was like number 70 on the singles charts. And the second record was a thing called The Skate.
The Skate.
And he said, man, you got to hear this drummer, Pretty Purdy. He's unbelievable. Listen to this. And he did all that boom, boom, gotcha, boom, jack, boom, boom, gotcha. In those days, nobody did that, And I went, holy shit, what is that? So I copped it from him.
Oh,
I started hearing that he's the one that did all that Aretha Franklin stuff and played all that, and I was whoa, So when I met him, I was like a bit gaga about it,
Oh, I understand. I was that way too, and he, that Purdy shuffle, he does that walking down the street.
Yeah,
he just has a thing about him, and of course I actually saw the sign.
Pretty Purdy.
Yeah, Pretty Purdy. If you want hits, call Pretty Purdy.
Exactly. Heard about that.
Hey Max, what was in like the dry cleaning?
What was the clothes like?
You had to pick up the dry cleaning. What do you have?
You got to remember
jackets and stuff.
Oh yeah, this was 1971, so it was right out of across 110th Street. Just flamboyant. The wide collars out to your shoulders, and it was right in the time on the east side of Manhattan. And I'd go in and I would just yes, sir, do whatever he wanted me to do, to absorb his vibe. And then I, actually my trying to get work before I joined the E Street Band, the fact that I studied with Purdy was my big credit. You know what I mean? Like, you try to pump up your credit. So that was my big, the head of my resume was the fact that I studied with him.
Yeah.
I tell people I picked up his dry cleaning and went for his groceries, but it looked good on my resume.
And also,
Vinny used to do that. Vinny did that for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Vinny would go.
He still dresses.
I let Vinny stay in my house one weekend.
I
let Vinny stay in my house one weekend, and he destroyed it.
Off his book.
Yeah.
Well, that's what younger brothers do, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Me and my friend, terrible.
Hey, Vinny, where are you now? Where are you broadcasting from?
I live in California near San Diego.
Oh,
and, yeah. So right now I'm up in Thousand Oaks where my drum company's located, and we did a whole bunch of videos and things for online purposes. And then tomorrow we're having a big jam with a couple of the people that are sponsored by this company. So it should be fun.
Well,
Rudy Saza on bass, Michael Badio on guitar, and Melody, who sings in a new up-and-coming young band, Liliac. She's an amazing singer. So we're going to play.
We've all had to be kind of creative now with the pandemic and the lack of live playing.
Yeah.
And then I do a thing for them every Tuesday at 4:00 on Facebook, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And I teach, crack jokes, tell some stories, show them some rock memorabilia. So I got this little show going, and it's through the drum company Sawtooth. That's the name of the company. And it's a great company, and they make guitars, they make everything. So as you can see, there's a room of guitars.
It's a hell of a living room you have.
We lost Ron. We lost Ron. What happened? Anyway.
Well, we'll carry on with that.
Yeah, we'll carry on. Usually Ron has good questions.
Here we go.
There he is. There he is.
I had a bad connection or something. Hey,
Ron has good questions and a bad connection.
Yeah.
Always.
Anyway, but you know what? Speaking of great connections,
We got another one.
Your 1984 book, I know it was a while ago, but I mean, it's a tremendous book, Big Beat Conversations with Rock and Roll's Greatest Drummers. How about, what is one of the coolest stories from your book? Because you talk to all of them, from DJ to all of them.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to talk to Carmine.
I know. I was just going to say they talked to everybody but me.
So the title, Rock's Greatest Drummers, and the list is really a misnomer. Because in my book, Carmine should have been the top of the list, but it was logistics. First of all, I never, I really am remiss. It was called The Big Beat. And it was interviewed with Ringo, Charlie Watts, Jim Keltner, Levon Helm, DJ Fontana. And there were a lot of drummers that I would have loved to have. I had to stop at one point. I also was writing it during the recording of, first of all, I'm not a writer. So this sort of took on a life of its own, if you know what I mean. It was like the longest term paper anybody ever had to do. I mean, it wasn't, it grew out of a meeting I had with Hal Blaine. I was introduced to the legendary, I guess it's too small a word for Hal. A friend of mine in LA introduced us. And I met him, and just like when I met Carmine, I asked him a million questions.
Can I use this white one and then use the big old...
Mentioned it to a friend of mine who said, hey, you should write this down. You're meeting these guys. And that turned into The Big Beat. And but as I said earlier, I am remiss because, it took 19 months. If I had kept going, it would have been, 10 volumes. I would have revised it. But I was fortunate to meet the guys. So many of them are not with us anymore. But it was interesting to actually to do that book. But as I said earlier, before Vinny got on, Vinny, I was part of a movement in New Jersey to book Carmine Appice and the Vanilla Fudge. That's how I thought of the Vanilla Fudge, was Carmine Appice and the Vanilla Fudge. No disrespect to, and the other guys, but for me it was like all about Carmine. So changed the direction of drumming, as I said earlier. That nobody had ever heard anybody play like that. And being just a couple of years older than me, he was your brother was well versed in the Krupa style. When the drummer was the star of the band. You had Krupa, and then he had 10 years later Buddy Rich. And these guys were selling the drums. They weren't just playing the drums. So the twirling, the hitting the snare drum, and doing I could never do that. I wasn't coordinated enough to do that. But I tried.
I don't do that stuff either. He's Gene Krupa. I'm more of a Buddy Rich.
And the whole look, the whole look with the rings and the turquoise rings and the Fu Manchu mustache, which if you see
he's got it all.
there's a record out.
Down. Oh my God.
Oh, forget it. I mean, I was just okay. If you're going to emulate somebody, I'm emulating Carmine Appice. But I did a record.
Don't put him in your book. But don't put him in your book.
Yeah, I'm telling you, conversations we've had over the last 40 years is a whole book on your phone.
When the book first came out, when the book first came out, I said to Max, "How come I'm not in the book?" He says, "I can't believe it. I forgot."
Yeah, well, it reminds me. They took the fanzine of Bruce Springsteen. Took a poll of the greatest, who's the best E Street drummer. There have been 4 of us. There was Vinny Lopez, the original drummer. Then Boom Carter, who played only on the song Born to Run. It was the only song he ever played on. It was a good one to play on. And then I came in 1974. And then when I had a scheduling conflict with TV, my son came in.
Right.
They took a poll of who was the best of the 4 of us, and I came in last. So what can I tell you? Sometimes.
How funny is that?
There's my son.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Oh, that's an old picture of him. That's Jay, who plays with Slipknot, wonderful drummer. And getting married.
You're lucky you got that picture. If you had the Slipknot makeup on, you wouldn't even recognize him.
You wouldn't see him. No, that's right. There's the loves of my life, apart from my wife Becky, the E Street Band. Yeah. There we all are. I forget when that was, but certainly anytime you see big man Clarence Clemens, is a wonderful boy. You're prepared for the show. This is like real production value.
This is real stuff here, dude.
Real. There you've got the dynamic duo, Steve Van Zandt and Bruce, who met when they were 14 years old. And they were the 2 guys who neither one of them really had friends until they found each other. And then they found each other. And that was, 60 years, almost 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
56 years ago.
Cool.
And there's Jake Clemens, who plays sax with us, and Clarence's nephew, who does a hell of a job in the band. And he's big. He's a big guy. Clarence would sometimes, when you're playing the E Street Band, it's a show band. So you really got to keep your eyes on the show, which is Bruce. So sometimes Clarence would get between me and Bruce, and he was so big, he would block Bruce out. A total eclipse of the E Street Band.
Right.
You wouldn't see him.
That's so funny. Wow. I used to watch you on the Conan show, when you were on the Conan show.
Well, that was I did that show for 17 years.
17 years. Wow.
17 years. I think something like 4,000 shows. That was wow. You are prepared. There I am with my partner, Jimmy Vivino, playing guitar, Mike Merritt on bass, and Conan, who is really a great singer and can, really play guitar too. He's partial to rockabilly, Buddy Holly, Stray Cats, that kind of stuff. But Mike, you'll see playing bass there. He has an interesting familial history. His father was the bass player of the original Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers.
Oh,
Jimmy Merritt,
nice.
legendary basso Mike, literally grew up in Philadelphia with everybody coming over to his house, from Miles Davis to Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie. He has memories of that as a young kid. Well, there I am. That was actually
Hey,
funny pictures. I did a surprise, like when Bob Hope used to run. Not that I'm Bob Hope, but you'd have somebody like Bob Hope walk onto the Tonight Show. I did that at Conan when he was had the band still on TBS, and I was out in LA, and we kind of set it up to do a walk on where his drummer gets into some mischief. He doesn't show up from the show, and I just happened to be sitting in the audience. And that was in LA because I was going up to near Sacramento or Bakersfield. It was Bakersfield to see the Slipknot play at Knotfest. They do this big festival, and my wife and I, Becky, we flew out there to see Knotfest, which is 3 days of unbelievable metal mayhem. It's really something.
Mayhem.
Yeah. Oh, it was a lot of fun. Great bands.
Yeah.
You get to see, just young bands, established bands. They put on a hell of a show. So
I remember when I came to see you in New York with Conan. You hooked me up with the backstage and everything, and backstage was what's this guy? The tennis player who played on my Guitar Zeus record. I forgot his name right now.
Plays guitar. John McEnroe.
Yeah.
John McEnroe.
Yes, John McEnroe.
John McEnroe.
He was backstage, and we hooked up and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Yeah, I'm just visiting Max.
It was fabulous to be at 30 Rock in NBC for all those years. And then we moved out, did the Tonight Show for just a year. And but it was the way the studios are organized out at NBC. It's kind of like a high school hallway because everybody would take these shortcuts. So you never knew who was going to be walking down the hall. And you'd meet some really interesting people who were maybe on the news that night. My favorite people were the people kind of, that I grew up with when I was a kid. The Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, met Kirk Douglas there, Tony Curtis, James Coburn. Now, these are names that you've got to be kind of vintage, born in the 40s or 50s or grow up in the 60s.
Those are all the guys that used to hang out with Rod Stewart in the bar in his house. Tony Curtis, those there all the time. He had Gregory Peck lived next door. It's like one of those deals,
Well, these Peace Brothers have played with more stars than I have. So, I mean, the bold-faced names, I mean.
Yeah, right.
I basically one guy.
But you did a lot. And
now you got
you're very successful. A lot of people love you, as we do. Even though Vinny's not in your book,
Well, I have to cut it off somewhere, and as it turned out, all the drummers, it all led to Ringo.
Yeah.
And there's a picture in the book that was, so I did all the photo research and I went way over budget. I mean, there was no budget for this thing, but I really wanted it to come out the right way. And so I hooked up with a guy named Dejo Hoffman, who was the Beatles' official photographer back when they were big in England before they came here. And they brought him to America to photograph them. And, the Beatles photographs were for a long time, you only saw what they wanted you to see. And he came out in the early 80s with all the outtakes of these famous photographs. So I said, I bet he must have something of Ringo that was never used. Because everything that was in the book at that time had never been used, any of the photographs. Whether it was Johnny B, was a good friend of ours, to Levon Helm. So I went to the guy's studio, and he was quite old at the time. He was probably late 70s, early 80s. I mean, for me, I was 32, I think. And but he had all this just Kodak boxes everywhere. I mean, no waterproofing, fireproofing. And I said, well, I'm looking for a picture of Ringo that hasn't been used, and that's kind of indicative of Ringo, And this is in 1981. So he took me into a file room, a cabinet, like those flat cabinets. And I don't think I've ever told this story, but so he had all these outtakes, and there was a picture of Ringo where John, Paul, and George were in silhouette. You couldn't see their faces. And there was a light on Ringo with a star that was a reflection from his drums. And they never used it because he said Brian Epstein, you couldn't see the rest of the Beatles. So they never used it. It was never published. But it was perfect for my book because the last chapter was Ringo. And, and I asked him, the last question was there anything that he hadn't done in music? And he said, well, I would have liked to have been in the audience for a Beatles show. It was the one thing he didn't get to experience where the rest of us did. Great story. That's the story of that picture.
Hey, Max,
Wow.
when
That's
the whole Springsteen train started going, I mean, 1974, it starts happening. Did you actually see this whole thing start to? I mean, did you guys see it happen? See it coming, rather? This big, like, monstrous thing it turned into?
Well, that's a great question. No, he was very, he really controlled. He was very hesitant to fall prey to a lot of the early publicity that he got, and even before I joined the band, and he controlled it, wanted it on his own terms. What I knew immediately, within 20 seconds of playing with him, 60-something drummers auditioned. He played with everybody for at least a half hour. And I didn't know his records, but I was a good improviser. I came out of a jam scene at the time, which really was not what I wanted to do. I just liked playing a beat. Kind of, I knew that was my forte, and playing shows. I was a show band drummer, which is kind of all the drummers we admired, Carmine, they all played shows. They were, they came out of show drumming, cutting a show, which was different than sort of, jamming and playing, a lot different than just jamming. But I could tell within 20 seconds, this guy really had it. And it wasn't just the way he projected, but it was also at my audition, it was Clarence Clemens on sax, Gary Talent playing bass, and Danny Federici, the late, great Danny Federici, playing organ. It was just the three of them and Bruce and me. But I could tell the way they were paying attention to him. That was really key. And you guys know what I'm talking about, was that there was such a focus on what he was doing. That's like the hardest thing to get in a band, is everybody pushing in the same direction. But they were laser focused on everything he did musically and physically. And the way I got the gig, I didn't find this out till 20 years later. I was curious. I never knew how I got the gig. I don't know if you've heard this story. I told it a few times when someone asked. But so we're playing this up-tempo shuffle thing, and there were a lot of sort of accents. And he was accenting the accents with his body, which was kind of easy for me because, if a dancer kicks, you hit a cymbal, or a comedian, or rim shot. And I had that kind of what they used to call legitimate drumming, right, Carmine? Legit. That's right. Yep. And cutting a show because I had to work, and I was young to be doing that. But we're playing this song, and in the middle of it, he kind of went like this, like stop, right, stop, which was, if you're paying attention to him, it was pretty easy. It was like, safe, right? So he said about half the guys stopped, and he did it again if you didn't stop. He did it 3 times, and if you didn't stop 3 times. That was the test. So I was like the 58th drummer, I think.
Oh, man.
And they played all summer, the summer of 74. Didn't do any gigs. They played all summer holding auditions, open auditions. Anybody could, it was in the village, it was in a newspaper. It said Bruce Springsteen E Street Band on Columbia Records, right? So I was playing in the Broadway show Godspell at the time. I went down there. Anyway, we stopped. That was pretty easy. I was watching him stop. And then it was a long pause. And then he threw out his arm like that. And I hit a rim shot when he did that. And that's what got me the gig.
Oh.
Out of all the drummers, 60-something drummers, I was the only one who hit that rim shot. And at the time, he was the only guitar player, and I didn't know him. I knew he was from Jersey. At the first audition, I hadn't listened to his records because it said Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry. I didn't even bring a whole drum set. I only brought a bass drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat. And I figured, well, that's what those guys used pretty much. Tom.
Well, the rest of your kid was at the theater.
It was at the theater, yeah. It was a Slingerland set that I covered. I covered it in contact paper because I left it there. So it's too late to say long story short, but I do the rim, he does the rim shot, and I didn't know this at the time, but he was the only guitar player. He wanted to put the guitar, he was getting a reputation as a hot guitar player, and he's an incredible guitar player, apart even from what he does. He can play Wes Montgomery like nobody's business, right? If musicians know what I'm talking about. He's really very well versed, but his singer-songwriting and a fun man. He wanted to get a guitar player in the band. But at the time, the first tour I did, he played all the guitar. So the sort of that stage business, he wanted a show band drummer. And I took a big pay cut to join that band. But as Duke Ellington once said, a musical profit far outweighs a financial loss. And it was $50 a week we started.
Amen. That's what we're doing here every week.
Well, listen, a life in music.
We're having fun.
Look, we all meet, the three drummers here, and Ron, I don't know if you play drums or, if it wasn't for you, none of us would be employed with the great venues. But, we meet people all the time who are our age who say, I played in high school, I went to dental school, or I became a lawyer. And there's a little bit of, bittersweetness about it. They may have had a great career, steady thing for the last 35 years. But boy, they just don't know what it would have, been, what their life would have been if they had stayed in music, the ups and the downs. I mean, you just do whatever you have to do to reinvent yourself. To try to control whatever you can, try to make good decisions, and apart from all the fun that it is to play. I mean, when we get on a drum set, I don't care who it is. When you get on a drum set and you start to play, you're 12 years old. Yeah, you're 12 years old again. If you can maintain that kind of kid thing, because the rest of it is hard work, and it all makes sense, and it all that.
I always say I joined Vanilla Fudge when we called the Pigeons. 9 months later, we had You Keep Me Hanging On the charts.
There you go.
And we made it big. I said, why? That was easy, and it was harder to stay there.
It's hard to stay there.
It was harder to stay there and keep doing it and keep being successful on that realm than it was to actually get there in the first place.
Well, I say to people, put on the Cactus record with Parchment Farm.
Right.
And as a drummer, hearing that for the first time, how in the world is Carmine doing that? How is he playing that beat?
That was like a freight train. And when we did that song, we just wanted to do a song that was faster than 10 years after I'm Coming Home. I'm Coming Home,
yeah. I'm Going Home, right. Yeah, it was.
It was like a freight train. When we heard the recording, Les Paul's son engineered that. Gene Paul, up at Atlantic Records in the studio there. When we heard it coming back in the studio, when we played over the big speakers, we couldn't believe how unbelievable it sounded, because really there's no rhythm guitar on there. It's just a straight ahead 4-piece band with the harmonica being played live, right into the vocal mic. And it was like one or two takes, and we nailed it. And when we came in and listened to it, we said, "Oh my God!" And then the sound of it was like, the bass drums were just killing.
My whole band. So I did a record in '69, came out in '70 for Epic Records. It was called Blackstone. It was basically my late high school band, and we all went down to see Cactus at Convention Hall in Asbury Park.
I remember that gig.
We drove down. Our organ player had a Volkswagen bus,
Oh,
21
Wow.
window Volkswagen Bus, which if it was restored now would be about $200,000. We all went down
Right.
there, convention hall, 3,000 seats. You know, we're just in the audience, and you know, we tried to get, you know, we kept trying to move up closer, you know, but we were way in the back. We finally got up to sort of where the floor seats started. The sound coming from that stage of Cactus, you know, it was just incredible. And then you have, so listen, it's a pleasure to be with the Appice family here. At least the drummers in the Appice family, and
yeah.
you know,
And you know what? In our family, Max, there's 7 drummers on my father's side.
I didn't know
wow,
that.
is that right?
Yeah, there's me, my cousin Joey. There's me, then Vinny, my cousin Anthony, my cousin Frankie, my cousin Michael, my cousin Tommy. And Tommy lives here in Florida. We're going to see him tomorrow. Tomorrow's my son's birthday. We're having a little birthday dinner at our house. And Nick is here now, Vin.
Oh, cool.
All I know about you, I did not know that.
Yeah,
When
you
you
got something?
their names just now, you sounded like Paul Sorvino in Goodfellas. Wedding scene. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right. The
Cousin
mob.
Joey, cousin
Oh,
Frankie, cousin Michael, cousin Vinny, cousin Tommy.
That's right.
The mob. The mob of drummers.
In New Jersey. Jersey is, you know, the fact that Manhattan is in the middle of Brooklyn and Jersey. If you're from Jersey or if you're from Brooklyn, it didn't really matter because you can get to both of those places without going through the city. So there's a real kinship between Jersey and the area of Jersey I grew up in, North Jersey, you know, Newark, and Brooklyn. You know, it's funny.
Yeah. I remember, Ron, you'd like this. Max has the original Ringo Beatle drumhead that used to be on his bass drums. I said the Beatles.
Come on, I was just going to.
And now the few people, very few people know that I do. I have now it's out there, Carmine. That you just made news, Carmine, which is all right. It's number 5 of 7, and there's actually a drum story connected with it, and Carmine and possibly Vinny too. You probably remember Frank Ippolito.
Yes, of course.
Frank Ippolito was a famous drum store owner in New York City. His place was called the Professional Percussion Center, and it was on the corner of 8th Avenue and 50th Street on the 3rd floor. And a lot of it was called the in place for drummers, right?
It was, yeah. It was,
so I bus into New York and get off at Port Authority. I go to Newark, take the bus to Newark, take the bus to Port Authority, and drive and walk the 8 blocks to Frank's Professional Percussion Center. When I was, 14, 15 years old. Ron just left, so I'll continue telling. He just went away.
No, Ron just got he froze. So whenever somebody freezes, we get rid of him.
So Frank, who was actually the drummer in the Glenn Miller band in the late 40s and early 50s.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
One of the drummers did not go, thankfully, he always thanked God he didn't go to England with that band. He collected drum heads. And he was right down down the street from the Ed Sullivan Show. So they would occasionally supply drum sets, drum heads. And if you notice the pictures of the rehearsal pictures of the Beatles' debut on the Ed Sullivan Show, in the afternoon, he was playing a white drum set. He wasn't playing his Black Oyster Pearl Ludwig drums. He was playing a backline set for the rehearsal, which was on, I think the rehearsal was Thursday or Friday. And then they had a dress rehearsal on Saturday and a rehearsal on Sunday. So they did get the set from Ludwig, and they had the hand-painted, drum head. That was number 1. That was a 20-inch Remo drum head. So Ringo, during his career with the Beatles, had 7 hand-painted drum heads. He had 2 20-inch drum heads and 5 22-inch. The Frank used to collect, if you remember his back office, he had all these big band drummers, jazz drummers, Cozy Cole, Sonny Greer, the SG from the Duke Ellington Orchestra. He had all these bass drum heads hanging from the ceiling, and he had some rock and roll bass drum heads. During the time I went there, which was 65 to 67, I remember he had a Yardbirds head, had a couple of the bands that played on the Ed Sullivan Show. So when the Beatles did their 65 tour, they didn't bring their drums. Ringo brought his cymbals, did not bring his drums.
Wow.
There's Ron. I don't know if you heard this, Ron, but I'm telling the story of this drumhead.
I heard it all.
Somebody named Eddie Stokes worked at Drum City in London, and he was also a painter. And a guy named Ivan Arbiter ran that store. And when Ringo bought his drums there, the reason he played Ludwig was it was very unusual to have a Ludwig set of drums in England. They didn't have a distributorship. Everybody was playing Springsteen, which was a German company, or Premier, which was an English company.
Yeah.
So Ringo wanted a Ludwig set of drums. Of course, Ringo put Ludwig over the top, right?
Yeah.
After, and they had, as big as the Beatle name, the Ludwig name. So if you notice through the years, the Ludwig name got smaller and smaller. Brian Epstein realized, I'm not promoting Ludwig drums. So the paint would peel. The paint would peel off. I'm really extrapolating on this story, just expanding how I came to get this drum head. And there are 3 or 4 that are known. The guy who owns the Minnesota Vikings, I think it is, bought the original first head. And another guy bought that drum set, or I may have that backwards, but I know his name is Wilk, bought either the drum set or the original drum head. In any case, these drum heads, they were hand painted. I just disappeared. Oh, there's Vinny. Yeah, sorry. So they were hand painted.
All disappearing.
If it got beat up on the road, they just paint another one. There was no value in them other than the $12 that the drum head cost and the $5 they paid the guy to paint it. This is the guy who came up with the logo, the drop T and the wide B. And if you look at all the heads, they're all a little different. They're all painted differently. So my drum head was only used on their U.S. American tour the summer of '65. And when they got to San Francisco, they gave the drum set back to basically Frank Ippolito's sort of counterpart in San Francisco to give the drum set back to Ludwig. And they left a head on it. So the guy out there had the drum. He had the drum set in his store.
Man.
He sold the drum set with the head to Frank. 67, 68. Frank sold the drum set and kept the head. When I started going there was no head. But then in 68, I went back in his office. And, drummers, Mel Lewis, all the drummers would hang out there. I mean, as a kid, I'd go there and you'd have, Papa Joe Jones playing on the pads that were on the counter. It was phenomenal. It was a hang. And so, he had this share of rock heads. And I said, gee, hey, Frank, would you ever, sell that? I noticed the Beatle head. I said, is that really? And he told me the story. Yeah, but, the Beatles were still together. And they did their 66 tour. They had other drum heads. There was no value in it other than, it was cool looking. And he was really, he hated rock and roll, and he was really into having the big band heads. He had a Chick Webb head. That was huge to have a Chick Webb head. Yeah. And now I'm getting really deep into the weeds here. But so finally, Frank became ill, and in 1970, it was around the same time the Beatles broke up. He became ill, and I asked him if he'd, again, would he ever sell that? And he goes, well, let me think about it. I went in there a couple of weeks later. He goes, hey, you want that drum head? Give me $100. So I didn't have $100.
$100 for Ringo's drum.
I borrowed the money from my sister's boyfriend, my older sister's boyfriend. I gave him $100 cash, and he gave me the head. And then, the Beatles broke up that April, 1970, and there was still no market in Beatle. There was no memorabilia market. So I always had this head, you know, and I paid $100 I didn't have. I paid my sister back, but I had the drum head, and I always had it on an old bass drum, like a 1920s bass drum, maple, that had one, you know, single lug across it as a coffee table. And I put it on top of it, right? And nobody ever thought about it. And it was just, you know, but then, of course, you know, Beatlemania, or the Beatle memorabilia mania took off with rock memorabilia in general. Bill Wyman, by the way, is divesting himself of all of his everything. And there's a big auction, and I think it's next week or 2 weeks. His amps and the amp he had when he got in the Rolling Stones.
Oh God!
I always had this thing, and it's a little bit. You walk into my house, and you know, I have it in my sort of listening room, and you know, it. Then when we were playing England, so I've always had it. I've had it since, you know, 1970, late 70, and I even have the receipt from Frank. Later on, I got a receipt from him, and so it became kind of like, wow, you know, he was my early drum hero, and I had this drum hit. But then when we played in England in '85, Ringo had a party at his house. And I knew him by then really well. And after the show, we played in Wembley Stadium. He had a party, and a bunch of us went out to his house, which was John Lennon's house. And there were a bunch of, Jeff Beck was there, a bunch of actors. It was a big jam. But I had a little anvil case made for the head. I carried it around on that tour.
Oh, no.
And, to see if he'd sign it for me, right?
Oh, that's a tough one.
So I carried this anvil case around, just 22 inches big, you know, with the felt padding. The
man.
I brought it to his house, and he signed it to Max, Love and Luck, Ringo Starr. And he doesn't sign autographs. He hasn't signed autographs in years. And then before that, for about 15 years, he just signed Ringo. But, you know, Love and Luck, Ringo Starr with a little star. So it's sort of something that, you know, inspires me when I look at it. And because all of us stand on the shoulders of those great drummers who came before us.
Yeah. You think Paul will say that?
Like the Appice brothers. And in my case,
hey,
you know.
Hey, Max, I was at that house, the John Lennon house with Black Sabbath. We recorded one song there. The big, with the white room. Yeah, the white room where Imagine was filmed.
Imagine, right? That was the living room when Ringo had it. John only had that white piano, but he built that recording studio right off the kitchen, down a hallway.
Yeah, that's what we used. Yeah, and that's after John passed, you know. And I got his room to stay in, but I didn't take it.
Kidding. Wow, that's really.
I didn't take it because it was too freaky. He just died, and that's like I don't want to go in that, you know, stay in that room. I saw too many horror movies when I was a kid.
Well, that's cool to have recorded in there. I'm on a recording in there with this jam that Ringo, I'm sure, has. And they had Jeff Beck was there, Nils Lofgren, of course. It was, you know, some of the Clarence, I think, came out. It was one of those really, really late night jams.
Yeah.
So, I think you have to be our
dominated this conversation. I'm sorry.
Hey, Ron, turn up your volume. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, what I'm saying is I think that Max is going to be our only guest that we're going to invite back twice with so many stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
because half the conversation got cut off by the terrible connection. For me. I'd love to hear these stories.
I've enjoyed this hour we've spent together, all three of us. I can remember a mental image. I'm sure Carmine doesn't remember this, but we went into their dressing room was the girls' locker room in my high school, Columbia High School, Maplewood, New Jersey, and I cornered him in there. And you know they had the benches, you know, like by the lockers.
Yeah.
I finally got him alone.
It's 8 o'clock.
And by the way, there was no sound check because they were late. They just went out and killed. It was unbelievable. But I got there, and I can still visualize myself, Carmine, sitting on this hard wood bench. You're sitting there with me, and you are decked out. You are in rock star regalia. I'm like, I'm wearing like a little college crew shirt, and it was one of the most impressive and for me at the time. I mean, I was 17. Life-changing experiences. I'd never. He was the most famous person I'd ever met. I never met anybody.
Wow.
You know, and then suddenly I was meeting my drum hero. So you know, I'm in age between Carmine and Vinny.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, Vinny, you looked up to your older brother and all your relatives who played drums, but which is something I didn't know. You come from.
No, I didn't look up to them. I only looked up to Carmine, not my relatives.
Well, you looked up to the right guy, because so did John Bonham, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, some people all these years later may not realize it, but in the history of rock drumming, no Carmine, no John Bonham.
Oh,
John,
wow, that's a heavy statement. Thank you, man.
John, of course, John Bonham, who I never had the pleasure of playing or meeting. Just, you know, what can you say about John Bonham? But the Vanilla Fudge predated that, and that heavy drumming and the triplets, and those of us who were there at the time knew what an influence Carmine was on Bonham, who was just a complete natural.
Yeah.
You know, a natural, and took it his way. But nobody, you know, even if you listen to the early Deep Purple records, didn't have the kind of drumistic stuff. They were great drumming, but didn't have the little things that.
There you go. Look at that, Max.
There you go.
That's me on the top and John on the bottom.
All right. Well, there you go. My point proven. The drum set on the top came first.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was most impressive. And certainly, you know, and then Bonham went back to a single bass drum.
You know why?
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Okay. That picture you just saw was taken on its 1969 tour. And Robert and Jimmy, after that tour, told Bonzo, "You're too busy with two bass drums. Get rid of one of them."
Oh.
So he got rid of one of them, and the Led Zeppelin drum set was born on that kit.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, there. That's really interesting. Well, all I can say is, you know, I don't want to gush. I've been gushing, but no Carmine, no me.
Oh,
because that was the direction I went in.
Wow, hey, no Carmine, no Vinny.
Yeah, who knows where I would have been.
No Carmine, no Ron.
Well, listen, you know,
it's true.
You know, to be a soloist in rock, to be to be a soloist, that's not easy. There are only a few, you know, who could really pull it off, and Carmine led the way. And you know, I know he inspired Vinny, inspired me, and you know, so you're looking at a branch of the family upon whose shoulders I stood.
Right. Hey, listen, I got to run back to sound check. Max, so nice to talk to you and see you. And
I will see you at one of our mutual dates at some point.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Say hi to the guys, Vin.
All right, will do. You guys take care. Max, take care of yourself. Bye, Ron.
Yeah, buddy. Bye-bye, buddy. And Max, we can't thank you enough for really spending this time with us. I mean, really, the amount of stories. I mean, volume 2 of your book has got to come out. And at least this one, I know Carmine will be a big chapter in that book.
Well, absolutely. And of course, Carmine's written his own great book. So apart from Realism, he was the first guy who wrote a drum book. This is a groundbreaking guy. So, you know, ground. And now,
so I will see you over the house here soon, buddy. Okay?
we'll
work together.
I gotta thank you.
We're going to Delray. We're going to Delray tonight. With my
you are. Well, enjoy yourselves. We're down here in Florida, where no matter what else is going on, the trees are always green.
That's right. So is the grass.
That's right.
Thank you guys very, very much.
Guys, great to talk to you.
Thank everybody for joining us. Artists on Lockdown, hanging and banging. We'll see you next week. Max Weinberg, what can we say? You're a true legend. Carmine, my older brother, I love you. Thank you very much.
Next week we got Bruce Kulick next week.
Oh, man, this is crazy. Everybody like, share, do what you got to do. Tell everybody about this great show, Artists on Lockdown. We'll see you next week. Max, we'll see you at the Arcada Theater. sooner than later, my man, with your jukebox.
Thank you, Ron. Thank
Yeah,
you,
man.
Carmine. Good night.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.